Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cards. My name is Nelson and today we're coming from like kind of a mobile recording studio. It's not even really a studio. I'm on a porch. There's snow out. It's beautiful. I'm kind of on like a vacation, pseudo vacation, working vacation. And I plan on doing a couple more videos while I'm here. And I'm super excited because the first one, and I got everything set up because we got the final announcement for the Age of Apocalypse villain, which is Apocalypse. The second one. This is getting ridiculous. Now there are two of them. So we're going to be talking about the article. It's not a blind react. I have gone through, I've read the article, and so we're going to be just kind of discussing the mechanics of Apocalypse 2.0, and then kind of just, just seeing what cards come in it and talking about the article. Now, I know that there are spoilers out there online. I have tried to avoid those spoilers. I've seen a little bit, unfortunately, but people have people have posted the spoilers, but rest assured, in this video, we're not going to be talking about those. We are only going to be talking about things that come in this article or in previous articles. I know that there are people like me who tried to avoid those spoilers, and so I want to make sure that this video does that as well, just so y'all can watch the video too. Sweet. So, Apocalypse 2.0. We thought he was easier the first time around, but that's fine because we're getting him a second time for Apocalypse, the final villain. And the theme here is that after we've defeated Dark Beast, we're going back in time to try and prevent the assassination of Professor X, which is something that we all really want to, do because we don't want X to be assassinated. And we're going to be going back to, and I'm not going to. There's a lot of words in this article that I'm not 100% confident on the pronunciation of, so apologize in advance. But we're going back to the high-tech pyramid of In Saba Nur. Now this is the main scheme, and it has a similar feel to like a Zola or a Magneto main scheme, where we are adding counters to kind of accelerate the villain's growth. This one, after resolving step one, very similar to Zola, we're going to add a power counter. I think they're test counters in Zola. And then once we have 4 of those counters, we're going to remove those counters and discard cards until we get a superpower card, which we'll talk about here in a second. We got a couple of those previewed for us, and they're pretty mean. But I really like this because, sorry about that, my camera cut off. One of the joys of trying to figure out how to record mobily, of course. But what I was saying is that while we are sitting there and trying to grow, the villain actually gets to grow as well. We're accelerating the growth of the villain, which means that, our build heroes are going to have a little bit harder of a time building or taking the time to build. So I really like this. Threats out at 8. We don't lose the game, so it does sound like it is a multi-tier scheme, and so I'll be interested to kind of see what goes on past the pyramid, but I don't think we got anything about that. The coolest part about this entire scenario is the fact that Apocalypse is a flippable card. He's a 3-tier card. So there's, I think, one side of the card, the other side of the card, and then he folds out to big boy Apocalypse and he gets crazy and he's big. And that's just like a really cool thing that we really haven't seen in villains before. Now we've seen it like with Risky Business, where, you flip Norman, he has multiple sides of his villain card, but this is a really cool touch. I'm pretty happy with this. So basically, he has 3 modes. He's going to start out in Biomorph mode, and he already looks pretty mean because when he's in Biomorph mode, he's a 1-2 on stage 1. He gains Overkill, so those chump blocks are not going to help you. A lot of the times we like to use chump blocks to help facilitate that build. So now with Biomorph and that main scheme, he's really kind of preventing our heroes from building. And then he has a, when you change to this response, very reminiscent of an Ant-Man, and I apologize, there's probably a lot of noise. Very reminiscent of an Ant-Man. Whenever you change to this form, you do something. So whenever you change to the Biomorph form, you deal 1 indirect damage to each player. My guess is that is going to go up as our villain stage number does go up. So Apocalypse stage 1, then he is going to be flipping. And there's going to be a lot of ways. They say that there's going to be a lot of ways that he will be flipping throughout the scenario. But his other side, his other small side here is the Cyberpath. He can retaliate 1. He flips his stat line to a 2-1 rather than a 1-2. He's a 2-1. Then after he changes to this form, you place 1 threat on each scheme in play, which is pretty brutal, especially in a solo player, or in a solo game, right? And now that we have like player side schemes, this can really push us out of a easy like 3 threat threshold, where like 3 is, I think, just a lot easier than like a 4 threat. Like each one incrementally gets more and more challenging to remove. And so he's really teching against side schemes that we put out because it's every scheme in play. And there's just a lot of things that can throw trouble in our path with this side. Then when he flips to his big side, his double side Apocalypse, his giant form, he gains Stalwart. And so I like the fact that he doesn't have Stalwart on every single one of his sides, but we do run the risk of flipping into Giant. And if he is stunned and or confused, let's say he's stunned and we're banking on that stun, but we pull a card that flips him either through that superpower response on the main scheme, flips him to Giant, he gains Stalwart, we remove all the status cards at that point. And so it is a thing that we have to kind of play with, right? Where we have to know where those superpower cards are that are going to remove them from, are going to flip Apocalypse into Giant form, and just kind of be aware of that if we are going for that Sunlock. But he's a 2/2 here, and after he changes this form, heal 1 damage from him. He does start with 16 hit points per player on stage 1, and so he's not the smallest villain that we have out there, especially when you have healing. But we saw stage 1. I assume stage 2 and 3 are going to increase stats as well as maybe heal 2 or 3 damage from him after you change the form, and maybe stage 3. So looking really like a dynamic scenario, right? We're getting a lot packed into one scenario, and I'm very, very happy with this. It looks like a very fun scenario. I'm here for it. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna transition in talking about some of those superpowered cards, the superpowered traded cards that are going to come out either just from a standard encounter card flip or the forced response over here on our main scheme, where we're going to be, adding those power counters and then getting some of these cards. So some of them are pretty mean. For example, his biomorphic blast, and like this is this. Who is this? This to me looks like Vision, but that doesn't make any sense. But let me know who this is. But Biomorphic Blast, superpower card, so this is one of those that you would discard until you get. If Apocalypse is in Biomorph form, he activates against you. So if he's already in Biomorph form, you reveal this as one of your flips for this card, and you reveal it. So he's going to activate, and then immediately will activate again. So that can be pretty brutal, pretty brutal. But the Biomorphic Blast, otherwise, you change him to Biomorph form, place 1 power counter on the main scheme. So you're getting that acceleration to another superpower card even quicker with this card. So you're going to change him to the Biomorph form, which is the one that he starts in, the 1/2. And then you're going to place a power counter on the main scheme, meaning that he's going to get 1 even quicker. So that's one of the examples. We got 3 examples, 1 for each one of the forms. Plugged in is a superpower card. It is a side scheme, and it is important to note that the boost here, it changes him to Biomorph form, which would then trigger the activation of placing or dealing damage, I believe. Yeah, deal indirect damage. So you're gonna change, deal the damage, place the threat. Same thing with the boost. The plugged in comes in with 3 boost icons, so he's gonna be hitting hard, especially with overkill. But this is a crisis icon, meaning that we cannot take care of it. It's a 5 threat per player that does not scale, so that's pretty nice. But it does have a when defeated. If he's in the Cyberpath form, he activates against the player defeated this scheme, which is his second form that we looked at, the 2/1 form. He activates against the player. Otherwise, change him and give him a tough status card. So he's going to get a bonus. He's going to get that tough, changing, place a threat on every scheme. So as he's flipping, he's getting these forced responses, very similar to Ant-Man, right? Like we want to be flipping with Ant-Man, but we get benefit when we flip with Ant-Man and not when Apocalypse is flipping. So we have to get rid of this with this crisis icon. 5 threat is not the least amount of threat we've seen, especially in a solo, but for a player that's trivial. So that's nice. The last superpower trait thing that we're going to be talking about is the Staggering Strength, which is the one that kind of is tied to his giant form. It's an attachment. Whenever you attach it to him, you change him to giant form. He gets +2 attack, and then whenever he attacks you, you are stunned. Discard this card after this activation. So at least you only get it 1 time, but it's still a pretty brutal activate or a pretty brutal attachment. 2 attack, and a stun is not something to be laughed off. Also, as a boost effect, you reveal this card, which can be very, very lethal. Or I guess not lethal, but it can be very bad because you reveal the card. If he's not already in giant form, you flip him to giant form, he's going to heal, and you're going to have to deal with that. So I really like these attachments. I think that they are really interesting. I'll be interested to see how challenging they are because these are coming out at a higher frequency than a normal encounter card is. So we're going to be flipping the Apocalypse, and it's just, I'm pumped for it. But that's kind of what we saw for Apocalypse. He's got the Celestial Tech and the clan Akakra. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, as the mod sets that are coming with them. Don't know if these are actually going to be recommended or if they're going to be required. My guess is that one of these at least is going to be required. But the Celestial Weapon, or the Celestial Tech, let's talk about those first. These are attachments, and I am pumped for this mod set. I think that this is going to be a really fun mod set to throw into encounters outside of Apocalypse. I think it'll be really fun in Apocalypse as well, but it's going to be really, really cool to throw this onto Magneto. Ugh, actually, no, that'd be ridiculous. But throw it onto maybe Absorbing Man, make him a little bit more challenging because these are attachments. At least a couple that we saw. The Celestial Weapon here, you attach, it gets +0 attack, but after the villain attacks you, discard the top card of your deck. If that card resource has a lightning, deal 2 damage to your identity. A mental, discard a card from your hand. Physical, you are stunned, discard this card, and then wild, do all of the above. What I think is really interesting here is the only way that you can get rid of this card is to pull a physical. That's pretty cool. That's pretty nifty. I like how this is kind of teching against some of the, lightning builds. Captain Marvel's not gonna like running against this modular set because now we're dealing a lot of damage, and Captain Marvel doesn't like to run a lot of physical resources. And so if we have to figure out how to get rid of this card because this is a card that cannot stay around. Mental, you're discarding cards from your hand. I hate discarding cards. So you either have to get a physical or a wild to get rid of the card. Really, really cool design. I like it a lot. Domino hates this. I guess not necessarily really because Domino is only going to have to really deal with this one time because you're going to discard that card because she's running all wilds. It will be pretty interesting with Magic, who is able to manipulate that top card of her deck and flip it to like a physical. Make sure that you're discarding that physical so that you can hit the discard mechanism for a Celestial Weapon. But I think this is really cool. It's gonna be really fun to kind of challenge some specific heroes that really want to lean into, say, the mental, like Ironheart. Like this can really slow Ironheart down. Very similar to the weapon, we do have the armor here, which is very similar. Gives +0 scheme, and then whenever the villain schemes against you, you're going to discard the top, heal 2 damage on a lightning, physical, give the villain a tough status card, and then a mental, you are confused, but you then discard the card. So you're discarding a mental, and so through the different attachments, I assume we're going to see one of these for wild and one of these for lightning to discard as well, because this is a 4-card encounter set. I'm excited. I think that this is a pretty cool mechanic on how you can do this now that we have a lot of manipulation of the top card, like shields and everything, where you can play global logistics, global logistics, and manipulate the top card to make sure that you're getting this. I don't know. It's just really cool. It's also a pretty brutal effect for both of these if you're not getting to discard the card. So I'm pretty excited about this tech modular set. We'll see how we can manipulate some older villains with it. I think that's pretty fun. Then the clan, and then Akaba, and again, I apologize for the mispronunciation here, but this is another cool because it comes in with a permanent side scheme, which is the Ancient Ritual. Yeah, let's go. So it's a permanent setup side scheme. So it comes in, starts the game. It starts with 5 threat, and then after threat is placed here, there's at least 10 threat. You remove the threat, and then deal each player a face down encounter card. So this is another way to kind of accelerate that villain growth, the villain gets a little bit of tempo on our heroes, and this is, I think, a really cool way to do that. It's not just a straight hazard. You can mitigate this. Like if you have a player that is dedicated to thwarting this down, this never really matters. Now, a lot of the cards that we are going to be looking at deal with this and deal with placing threat on this scheme, but it's kind of a cool kind of, are we going to dedicate time to stopping the ancient ritual? And if we don't, we're going to be getting encounter cards, which is going to accelerate the villain's victory condition, because encounter cards are bad. We don't like encounter cards. Or are we going to be focusing on stopping the ancient ritual, where we're putting resources into removing threats and bringing down and stopping the ancient ritual, which is going to allow Apocalypse or whatever villain we put this modular set in to carry out what they actually want to do. I like it. I think it's going to be pretty cool, especially because a lot of the other cards deal with how we're going to be messing with this. Let's take a look at Ozymandias. Sorry. So Toughness Villainous, mean little minion here. One scheme, one attack, 6. He does have Villainous, so we are going to be revealing that boost card whenever he does activate. And we see a lot of boost effects both in this and in Apocalypse's kit, so it's going to be tough. When he schemes, we're going to place the threat on Ancient Ritual, so we can't just ignore him. If we flip down, at least it's not going to be accelerating the game end directly, but we are going to be, when he's scheming, placing that threat, which will give us more encounter cards. And it should be noted, and I need to like remember thinking about multiplayer, because it deals a encounter card to every player, so it's worse than a hazard. So if we're playing 4 players, it's going to deal 4 encounter cards, which is wild. But on a boost here, we either place 3 threat on Ancient Ritual, or it gets +3. I like the ability to choose what our effect is going to be, kind of choose our own demise here. I think it's not going to be as bad, because we can always choose the lesser of the 2 evils, and a lot of the times we can just chump block. Now, if Apocalypse has overkill, that gets a little tricky, but I do like the ability to choose. They're both pretty bad choices, but I do like the ability to choose here. The other one that we're going to look at, actually we have the Zealots, but I want to look at Scarab first, because I think Scarab's pretty cool. I also really like the art on Scarab. He's a 1/3, 5, quick strike. So he's coming in, he's hitting you for 3. There's going to be a lot of damage thrown at you in this scenario, and it's just going to be something that we need to be cognizant of, that we need to not get too low on our health, because there's a lot of things that are going to force direct or indirect damage, and that's just going to be something, and Scarab's a part of that, and that's just something we need to be thinking about. But comes in, hits you for 3. After he attacks, you place 1 threat on Ancient Ritual. So it's not just when people scheme out of this encounter set that we're going to be placing threat on Ancient Ritual. It also is when he's attacking. And if it defeats an ally, which a lot of the time, a 3 attack, if we can soak it, early game we can probably soak it. Late game, we're going to have a harder time soaking that, because especially with Apocalypse with overkill and hitting us really hard, we're going to not have the most amount of health in the world. So we may want to chump with a ally, but we're going to add 3 threat if it defeats an ally. So really cool design, really mean design, but I'm excited for Scarab and how it's going to be interacting with that Ancient Ritual. You know, I kind of think of it as like the sacrifice, right? Like we throw an ally in there, now they're able to sacrifice that ally, which accelerates the ritual, which is pretty cool. And then the last one here that we have is the Zealots. Now these are 2/2/3, which is a pretty beefy minion. A lot of the times those 3 health minions, we're not seeing a 2/2 stat line. So these are not anything that you can just ignore. They do have guard, so you can't ignore them, I guess, but they do have guard, and that is going to be something, meaning that we can't attack the villain, right? So we do have to take these out, but then they have a when defeated ability, which is like, ugh, gross. So place 2 threat on Ancient Ritual when you defeat them. You can probably manipulate the Ancient Ritual so that this is not going to be the end of the world, but it is annoying that you have to defeat them. It's placing 20% of the threshold of Ancient Ritual on when you defeat them. But I think, honestly, I think Apocalypse 2.0 is going to be really interesting and really fun. I think the Celestial Armor and the Clan Akara, and please help me with the pronunciation of that if that is incorrect, is the more interesting part of this, which is saying something, because I think Apocalypse looks awesome. But I'm really excited for the mod sets. I think this is gonna be really cool. Age of Apocalypse comes out on March 29th, which is a week from Friday. And I'll talk about how we're going to be kind of celebrating that release on the channel in the coming days. But that's it. Let me know what you think about Apocalypse 2.0 here, and let's have some fun. Alrighty, thanks for hanging out. See you around. Peace.